Hello, everyone. Welcome to Atsmawian Media Network. My name is Wale. Today we have special guest. Our special guest is Brother Jeff. Brother Jeff has been voice for the people of Tigray since the genocidal war starts. Brother Jeff, could you introduce yourself for those who don't know you yet?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you all and everyone who's put this together. Wale, it's great to be here with you. Brother Jeff, I'm in North America right now. I'm in Denver, Denver, Colorado. But I traveled extensively, spent a lot of time in Africa, a lot of studies, particularly along the Rift Valley, working my way from South Africa up to Tigray, which is today very specifically different than Ethiopia. And I've just been really interested in this genocide for 480 days. There have been individuals that have been systemically raped. They have been denied access to communication, food, etc. And so I've been laser focused on this human tragedy that seems to be going ignored by the larger population and movements of the world.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. When did you start knowing more about Tagaru or Tigray? Do you have any information before the war or all this like after the war? When did you start learning about them?
You know, I was under the myth of Ethiopia, like most people were under the myth of Ethiopia. And as a matter of fact, many people are still under the myth of Ethiopia. There are a lot of individuals today that are Tagaru, but they didn't know it. They were broadly invested in the story of Ethiopia, and they were more Ethiopian than anyone else. And then following this, the war actually began during an election. So I had spent a lot of time in Tigray. But I didn't focus necessarily on the micro story. I thought it was a larger story of Ethiopia. And when the genocide started, I began to have different questions than the studies, the tours, the interaction with Ethiopia that I had had over many years. I started asking, why would it be Ethiopians would watch other Ethiopians be systemically raped and then have a foreign government coming inside, i.e. Eritrea, and participate. And instead of seeing an outrage, I started seeing folks that were cheering, they were clapping, they were turning their back, they were walking their way, they were ignoring and saying in many regards that it was not taking place. So everything that I was seeing and everything that the world was saying inside of Ethiopia, there were a lot of individuals that were saying this is not true, when in fact it was. And so that made me go into a larger discussion of why is that, what's going on, and what is it that I thought I knew that I obviously didn't know. And that's what led me to 480 days later, having a total different understanding of what Ethiopia is, and what it isn't. And the results have been just surprising.
Awesome. Yes, it is very unfortunate. In 21st century, this can happen for more than 16 months. And I was just wondering why is Tigray genocide is still going on, but the civil society fighters BLM, Black Lives Matter, or even it was more than 10,000, 100,000 women was used it as a weapon of a rape on the war. And none of those civil rights fighters are stood up and they're not joining. And what do you think? What could be created to make worldwide awareness?
Well, you know, it's interesting because there are a lot of individuals that are standing up. Their voices are being amplified. So, for example, when you say Black Lives Matter, you know, I'm intricately a part of that, as well as individuals like Afwerki, Indele, Mickey Tigray, Danny Primo Dallas, Maletti. A lot of us are intricately a part of Black Lives Matter. And I do know that individuals from throughout the country are also raising their voice. However, in lieu of, you know, widespread media, which is often excluding what's taking place and showing and erasing the reality, then individuals think that there are not the voices that are standing up for Tigray, when in fact there are. and the Tigray diaspora, the Tagaro and the diaspora are also a part of Black lives inside of the United States of America and throughout the world. And their voices have been extremely loud. So I think that the attention that is garnered right now would not have taken place without the access to social media as it exists today, and then B, without those in the diaspora, whether they have a connection to Tigray or they just have a broader Pan-Africanist or they identify as Black and other. What is taking place is loud. It's been consistent over 480 days. And I just think that with this shift to Ukraine, the movement has to continue because there's going to be a cover that I believe Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed are going to use as a shield to unveil another level of tragedy and terrorism on the Tagaru people. And so I do believe Black Lives Matter is a large voice. It's just not really recognized, but it's there. I've had individuals across the nation that really speak up for Tigray, the Tagaru movement. They show up at the different rallies, and the coalitions are getting stronger. So the actual momentum that has taken place over 480 days, we can't discount it. We have to really look at why it's been able to sustain over a long period of time and to keep that momentum going until there's no more genocide in Tigray. That's the ultimate goal.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is not only I just mentioned like Black Lives Matter, but there's so many like civil society fighters, like women's, for example, their women association, their children's was like, prohibited not to get like medicine and food. But beside what Tagaru and like other like people stay fighting with us, I was just thinking like what could be done more to get over this, like in 21st century there's like so many information already there, and but still not like stopping the genocide like for over like 800, like 480. So what could be done to make like worldwide awareness, you think what could we do more?
We have to come to the conclusion and we have to come to the realization that Black lives don't matter. That's why we have a movement. Black lives collectively, they don't matter in the United States of America. They don't matter in Europe. They don't matter around the world collectively. Black lives matter don't even matter to Black people. You have the African Union sitting right there in Finfini, and they're joining along with the rest of the Western nations, talking about we're doing hearings. We'd like to have interviews. Without walking across the street and seeing the tragedy that's taking place throughout Ethiopia, particularly in Tigray. So until Black lives matter to Black people, we're going to continue to follow the Western European narrative of exploiting Black lives for their wealth, their labor, their resources, their bodies, while building a civilization at the expense of us. So Black lives matter don't matter to Black folks, and they certainly don't matter to those Black women who are being raped systemically. It doesn't matter to those who are being starved in the 21st century. It doesn't matter to those who have had hospitals that have been destroyed. Black lives don't matter when you don't have banking or access to your own resources. Black lives don't matter when you have lack of access to just simple investigations and journalism. Black lives don't matter. And until they do matter to the extent that you're seeing white lives mattering in Ukraine, they are deploying troops. They are putting forward sanctions. They are doing everything to deal with that part of the world when we have been talking about this for 480 days. And it is difficult to get some individuals to just use the word genocide. And so what do we need to do? We have to come together as a collective people around the world and demand a higher standard for one another and stop supporting these genocidal leaders that are more in service to Western powers than their own people. There's no reason right now that the continent should have this level of poverty, this level of destruction, this level of violence when we have the most resources and everything that makes the world go round. we got to put the onus on us and know that others are not going to come to save us. We've got to save each other.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you know, like one of the methods they use, like Abiy Ahmed Ethiopia and Isaias Afwerki Eritrea, is like they started the war when the U.S. election was happening. All the international media was like eye on the election, and right now the whole world is on the eye of like Russia-Ukraine war. And what could affect for this like Tigray genocidal war, this destruction? What could be affect?
Well, you've got to realize that these wars don't start when they tell you that they've started.
Hmm.
So anyone that pays close attention knows that the genocide in Tigray began long before the actual violence and the excuse used, whether
True.
you talk about my cadre, whether you talk about the attack on the Northern Command. Tigray had been under attack long before that. And so
True.
when you look at Ukraine, they have been in civil war. They have been warring with each other long before what you see taking place right now. So there's always a larger story. And until we begin to say, you know what, this is deeper than the Northern Command. This is deeper than my cadre. This has everything to do with the exploitation of land, labor, and lives. It has to do with profit. Then we'll get caught up in the narratives that the larger bodies push forward in media. And so what can be done? What must be done is, first of all, opening up to the world to see what is happening in Tigray, investigations, opening up for journalism, free and fair elections. Even if you're talking about democracy, the same thing that's happening in Ukraine is happening in Tigray, except you have an impetus of individuals that are going into Ukraine to at least address those issues. Whereas 480 days later, we're still saying stop the genocide in Tigray. So we can't get distracted. Yes, we can have compassion, human compassion for tragedies that are happening everywhere, but we can't stop our focus in Tigray and then shift our focus somewhere else. There's enough for all of it without us saying, you know what, I'm gonna abandon this work and then I'm going to go focus over here and make sure that's taken care of, and then come back over here and see that, women are still being raped and children and families are being starved. We have to stay focused. We have to stay diligent. We have to stay committed, and we have to continue to say, stop the genocide in Tigray.
Okay, yeah. Do you know, like this international community, including like the UN, the US, they don't do anything like meaningful action till now, like for 480 or like 16 months, like what's going on the active genocide in Tigray. So I don't know if they. What do you think? Like, is that like lack of information, or are they ignoring it? Like the Tigrayans are right now, they kind of out of patience, like. Except TDF, nobody can save Tigray, it seems like. So what was the case? Like the UN or the US, they don't do any meaningful action to stop the genocide.
Well, just think about the same narrative that's taking place. It's colonialism and it's neo-colonialism. We could say the EU, we could say the United Nations, but what about the African Union that's sitting right there in Finfini? Like,
That's a different story. The African
yeah,
Union
it's
becomes
like,
actually more supporter, Yeah.
yeah, because they're in support of the European powers. They're working on and in behalf of. And so the reason you don't have the level of engagement inside of Tigray is because those European powers they're still receiving whatever it is that their interests are. The reason that they are in Ukraine is because of oil production resources that may be jeopardized. When you don't have individuals that are coming in to stop a genocide, it's because their resources are not jeopardized. They're still getting the gold. They're still getting the exports. They're still getting the financial arrangements that are in place. The problem is they don't care about the human tragedy and suffering that's taking place. I guarantee you, if any of those resources were at risk, you would have boots on the ground, you would have a larger stance if those resources were being jeopardized. But they don't care about human life and destruction. And so, with that being said, we have to somehow build a world that cares about human life more than profit. And so that's why you're not seeing the level of engagement as it relates to Tigray, because they don't care how many of us die. They don't care how many Black folks kill one another. They don't care about any of that as long as they're still able to extract the resources. And so that speaks volumes, and it's very obvious to anybody who's listening right now.
Okay, so instead of like as Tegar or as like the human moral people they is fighting with us, instead of reaching out these politicians, would be better to mobilize it like civil society, civil rights fighters like Black Lives Matter and other like people with the moral. You think like better to reach out the society instead of like the government, right?
Well, politically, I think if you're able to get people elected who care about people more than profit and are not co-opted, then you're going to have a better chance of being represented if we're talking about representative government. But you have to look at Abiy Ahmed. There's nothing about representative government that he is interested in. He is the next autocratic, dictatorial leader on the African stage that will do anything to his people in the pursuit of power. So, for example, how do you have a Nobel Peace Prize on one hand and then genocide on the other? Those are incongruent as it relates to humanity. And then you see a partnership with Isaias Afwerki that is an active dictatorship. So if we're thinking about a political response, it's going to be hard to have a political response as it relates to democracy when you have leaders that are wholly invested in dictatorships. However, you can have individuals, and it always happens. Change happens when ordinary people come together. And so the same fight that we had in South Africa around apartheid is the same impact that we can have in Tigray. People coming together and utilizing their organizing ability, but also boycotting and not participating in the economies that are benefiting from the genocide. Once you start targeting those companies that are benefiting from genocide and you stop supporting them internationally, then they will bring pressure onto the system because their economy is being impacted. And so it's going to always be a people movement. And today you're seeing a lot more individuals learning about the name Tigray. They're learning about the genocide. They're being outraged by human rights abuses. And they're at least asking the questions. When they start saying, and we're not going to participate in those who benefit from genocide, we're not going to purchase those roses. We're not going to engage with that coffee. We're not going to allow the mining of the gold and all of the things that the Swiss and everybody else has. Then you're going to see larger voices adding their voices to the people and putting pressure on systems. And that's how things change all the time, from the bottom up, rarely from the top down.
Interesting. I want to add, the No More movement, Hermela and other her groups, created like by Isaias Afwerki and Abiy Ahmed intelligent, but they live in US. They have the opportunity, it's not like going to with the American value, American culture, but they still preaching, they supporting criminals. Even the US knows like how Isaias and Abiy, they do the genocidal war. But do you think like the US should do their homework to find out their citizens? They hold American passport, they live in America, but they crossing the American value, like supporting like war and genocide and criminals. So I was just wondering, how it should be done for these people. Can we make them accountable like on the there's like FARA is like a Foreign Advocacy Registration Act, and but they taking money, donations stuff, but like behind the scene is it's like orchestrated or like designed by Isias Afwerki's intelligence. So what do you think on that?
You got to advocate, organize, and lobby politically. And keep in mind, I've studied all of these different movements and I've watched them intensely. There's something very unique and different about the Tigray Genocide, Stop the Tigray Genocide, hashtag Tigray Genocide, that whole movement, and the No More movement. They're very different. And if you look at them, here's something that you will find that's very unique. The No More movement is more nationalistic and it's in line with a centralized government. If you go to their rallies, which they don't even have those rallies anymore, they lasted only about a couple of weeks because there wasn't the impetus of my mother's being raped, my father's being murdered, my family is being starved to death. The No More movement was more of a political approach. And at their rallies, they were talking about Biden more than genocide. And then when you would bring that up and they would say on my show, Brother Jeff, why don't you talk about the genocide in Amhara? And I'm like, I do talk about the tragedies everywhere, but I was at your rally and you didn't even talk about it. Like, if you are not talking about genocide and I'm at your rallies and you're talking about hands off Biden and you're talking about politics, then what you're talking about is you want a centralized form of government. You do not like this national federation of governments, and you don't like the fact that individuals have their own languages, their own cultures represented in a collective fashion. You want something different. So they're doing nationalistic politics. And so the tragedy is this: if you're under the myth of Ethiopia and you see that flag and you see a No More rally, you think you're looking at Ethiopians, when in fact you're not looking at Ethiopians in its fullness. You're looking at a small group that is organizing politically, and then they take the credit for all of the other Ethiopians throughout the diaspora in the world and say we speak for them. And then you have these politicians that don't know the difference either, and they talk with those individuals and they think that they are speaking for Ethiopians when they're actually speaking
Yeah,
for
actually, if they say
themselves.
no more, yeah, they should say even like no more Turkish drone. They should say like no more Russia. They should say no more like China. But when US or like EU, they say we're gonna send like independent investigators to find out who committed crime. They say no more. So it's kind of ironic. Like you will come in like foreign forces to your country, but you say no more for independent investigators.
Well, they're talking about, and I got to be very specific because people get a little nervous when I say this. You're talking about ethnic groups. The No More movement is really about the Amhara ethnic or cultural grouping. And it's not about the Amhara people, it's about the elite that manipulate the people and will have a genocide taking place in the name of Ethiopians. And I think that what the Tagaru community, in terms of locally and throughout the diaspora, should be doing is also taking that momentum of 480 days of protest and also doing political education, voter registration, and letting these politicians know that when you're talking to us, then this is what the Tagaru community is saying. Because most of those individuals that particularly the Democratic Party are pandering to, they vote Republican anyway. Mm-hmm. They're not in support of Biden and or his policies, etc. And so until you add a political dynamic as well as lobbying, as well as funding some of these politicians as well, then you're not going to get the political traction that you would get in a system that is really based on lobbying voter participation and political support. So I think if the Tigray community takes that 480 days of protest, and every one of those rallies, they have a voter registration drive attached to it, and then you start showing these politicians, look at all of these individuals throughout the diaspora and look at that political potential and look at their interests and know if you don't address their issues, then you won't get their political support. Now you become politically savvy, and then you get the attention of Washington or Europe and some of these other places.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I was really like surprised on this couple of days when Russia, Ukraine war starts in Russia, even though they don't have full democracy. So many Russians, they oppose the war, don't invade like Ukraine, and they go to jail, some of them and stuff. But when it came to Ethiopia, they almost like all this attack happened in Tigray and the genocide. Not Ethiopians, none of the Eritreans, especially Ethiopians, and they welcome foreign force and they don't say anything. So, in fact, there isn't any African country even denounce Tigray genocide, if I'm not mistaken. So, what do you think that? I mean, is that like has to do something with the culture, with the society, or the civilization? If we say like civilization, they say Ethiopia had like long civilization, but it's not like about building a church or like stuff. Of course, even the civilization is like born in Tigray, but I'm just wondering, honestly, when I see in a couple of days what happened, the Russians even they stood up, and but Ethiopians we didn't see none of those. What do you think on that?
You have to think about the level of terrorism that leads up to a genocide. Genocide is an extreme form of hatred, and it doesn't just happen overnight. It starts with, first you have to vilify and demonize a people to the extent to when if something happens to them, then you don't care because you've already been conditioned that they are worthy and in some cases not even human. I want you to think about that report, the Amnesty International report that says, I don't know if they realized I was a person. What that is saying is you have a genocide and the signature is on the bodies of women, and the perpetrators don't see those individuals as a person. And so when you get to that level, there's a lot of terrorism along the way. For example, rape, looting, destruction, opening fire on civilians, displacement. And so you have this level of disjointment, and you have others that are watching that are saying, and that's okay. While at the same time saying they're Muslim or they're Christian or they're a faith and they are of a nation that is rooted in some type of scripture. When genocide takes place, they say, well, the reason it's taking place. They get upset with me because I say there's no reason for genocide. There's no reason for rape. There's no reason for starvation. When you get to that level, you have already crossed the boundaries of being and showing a lack of humanity. And so why is there the silence? Well, because some individuals are terrorized. Other individuals have been conditioned to say it's okay. Other African nations, that's how they do it anyway. Like, it's hard for some of those African nations to condemn genocide and to vote against genocide in Tigray when they are just as wicked and evil to their own populations as what you're seeing today. There's a level of hypocrisy. So think about the Rwanda genocide. It took place over 100 days. We are 480 days into a genocide. The world says never again should a genocide like this take place, or genocide in general. And we are 380 days beyond the 100 days of genocide in Rwanda. Why? If you study genocide, less than 2% of people ever speak up against what is taking place. And today you have a small collective voice of individuals speaking up, but the world is being silent. Why? Either they're benefiting from it, they're terrorized about it, or they don't care because they've got their own stuff going on that is even resembling what's taking place, or they're just doing all right. They don't want their lifestyles to change if, in fact, they say something. The Tagaru community and the world was wondering why the Abun was being silent, why the Abun, Mathis, I believe his name is, was being silent. He wasn't being silent. A white guy had to bring out his message smuggled in his cell phone.
Yes.
Saying that he is disgusted by and concerned with what's taking place, but he has been silenced. And so if you look at the Tigray Genocide, what is happening there is largely being silenced to the rest of the world. And that's why platforms like this are so important, because there are people who are watching right now that are saying a genocide is taking place. The head of the church is being censored and arrested. The Tagaru Orthodox Church has left. The Pentecost have left. The Tagaru have left the building. What's taking place? And so folks are silent largely because they are either conditioned with state-sponsored media that constantly says what's going on isn't going on, or the consequences of speaking up are too vast. But a genocide is taking place in Tigray, and it needs to stop. And whether it's one person or a million, everyone needs to say, I understand it, it's not acceptable, and we're going to stop it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for breaking up that. Yeah. And you start like being you start with the truth, and which is we would thank you to be helping. It's kind of for Tagar, for us at this time was like very hard to find like somebody can be morally standing for the truth, and like it's hard to learn about the Tigray genocide as well. So when you start like be voice for the stop Tigray genocide, and what was the reaction from the Tagaru, and what was the reaction from the Ethiopian? Your experience?
Well, the reaction is changing, because once you start being able to articulate what's actually taking place and ask questions, intelligent questions, the ones who are against you, they can't respond. So they respond with words like, "Oh, Brother Jeff, you're a junta." Hold on just a second. And so you can see I'm multitasking. But they start with the name calling. And that leads to another question, because in the diaspora, individuals believe that Ethiopia was the solution and the beacon of Black unity. And if we could all just be like Ethiopia, then we could resist European colonialism. And then when you start studying more and you start hearing things like junta, Gabar, Shankilla, Baria, I'm like, what in the world is going on amongst Black people to where you have the same discourse that's taking place in what we would call white supremacy, but that same supremacy happening amongst Black people? And when you start having those conversations, then they don't want to engage you, because from the outside, you've learned something that was taking place on the inside. And so being a voice of the voiceless is easy, because I'm used to speaking up. I know what democracy is. I know what my rights are. I've been targeted, attacked in a society that attacks Black folks. I know that folks coming from Ethiopia that are in the diaspora, most of them are here for the very same reasons that are taking place right now. They are in the diaspora because of genocide. They're in the diaspora because of war. They are in the diaspora because of starvation. They are in the diaspora because of conflict. And it's something about us that we can't break the cycle. And each generation thinks that this is new. And so the Tagaru appreciate me, and humanitarians appreciate me because I say stop the genocide. I articulate what's taking place. I say what they can't say. I use my platforms to share with the broader world what's taking place throughout Tigray, throughout. I know Ethiopia is in a civil war. I know it's on the verge of collapse. I know the Tagaru have left the building. I know who the Oromo are. I know about the Afar. I know about Gumez. I know about Harar. I've been in all of these different places. I just see it now from a different vantage point, and I see that the oppression that is taking place is not new. The Tagaru are the most fierce, fighting, staunch community on the planet. They have fought everyone who has come across that Red Sea and has penetrated Africa. The Tagaru are like the like Afghanistan. They have fought everybody and won. Folks don't know that inside of Tigray, when they talk about the Battle of Adwa, that's in Tigray. When they talk about Queen Sheba and the palace, that's in Tigray. When they talk about the flight of the Prophet Muhammad, alayhi wasalam, and his companions, that the first flight was not to Medina, it was to Tigray. They know that the first church in the 4th century and all of that is in Tigray. And so to know that history and to share that history, individuals don't know the intimate detail that I know about Tigray and Ethiopia. And so when folks start hearing their stories and the truth coming forward, they appreciate it. And now there are a lot of individuals who don't know their history that are not from Tigray that listen, and they're learning their history as well. And until we're able to respect our own stories without the bias of someone else telling our story, then you're going to continue this cycle of genocide. So a lot of folks are grateful and others are learning along the way. And I'm going to continue to say, stop the genocide in Tigray.
Well, thank you, Brother Jeff, to breaking up this and informative highlight about the Tigray history as well. Actually, if people they know, they want to learn history of Tigray. Tigray is the real Wakanda, the real life of Wakanda. If you be proud of like African, you can check. It's not gonna be like a long time to see like the real Wakanda in Tigray after this genocide, because all this like Ethiopian history was built was like in Tigray. But this was like all my questions. We came to the end of the program, and if you, I will give you a couple of minutes for any message you want to say for your followers in the channel, or for the Tegaru, or for the U.S. and international community.
You know, I want to begin by saying, and again, I want to say thank you for the work that you're doing. It's wonderful to, you know, meet and have a conversation with you and your entire team. I want to say for 480 days, a genocide has been taking place inside of Tigray. 480 days, there has been systemic rape. And so if you think of the humanity of women worldwide in those international movements, then women are being raped, and it's worthy of your attention to say systemic rape where foreign objects are being placed in women's body parts is totally unacceptable. Starvation in the 21st century is unacceptable. When you think about targeting hospitals and historic sites, this is unacceptable. And so my message is everyone should look in and see what's going on without the excuses. No, but not say, well, you know, the reason women are being raped is because of this, that, these, or those. There's no excuse. I don't want to have a political conversation about human rights. I don't want to hear what someone says about what happened over 27 years or 1,000 years or 2,000 years. I want to make sure that that young individual right now who has nothing to do with anything except wanting to enjoy life and to have a quality, decent livelihood has an opportunity to do that, especially in the cradle of civilization. And when you think about that, then we should all get behind that. And when individuals say to you that it's not true, ask them, how do they know it's not true? When the UN says it's true, when the United Nations says it's true, and even when Abiy Ahmed himself says it's true. On the other side of 100 days, when we were leading up to this, Abiy Ahmed was saying Eritrean troops are not in Tigray. Eritrean troops are not in Ethiopia. Rape is not taking place. All of these things are not being said anymore. The truth is right here. My message is stop the genocide in Tigray. Tigray is north of Ethiopia, south of Eritrea, east of the Sudan, and in the hearts of the Tagaru people throughout the diaspora. And when you say, who are we, Tagaru, that means something. Say it with your chest. Say it 10 toes in with your chin up. Know that you are a powerful people, and share that with your children, with your family, share it with the world. Stop the genocide in Tigray. Thank you all for everything that you do. It's been 480 days, and from a global standpoint, that is a shame. That is an indictment on us. It's not just on the hands of a government or a leader or a person. In the 21st century, genocide shouldn't take place. Stop the genocide in Tigray. I'll keep saying it, and I'm going to continue to be a voice for the voiceless as long as inhumanity takes place. Humanitarians will and should and will always stand up. Tigray Tisa'er.
Brother Jeff, thank you to being to the right of human right, and thank you for the true moral where you supporting for Tigray. This is like human moral, and we need more people like you. Thank you, everyone. Please subscribe and share Axmama Media Network, and also please follow Brother Jeff YouTube channel. You will see, you will learn more about the Black history and US history, human rights. Thank you.